Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Matin Bek, the Minister for Local Self-Governance here in Kabul in Afghanistan, but far more influential than that description implies. He's very close to President Ghani, and in the last 5 years has been very much part of just not local self-governance, but also the security apparatus. Matin, welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you, Jyoti. Thank you.
So my first question to you is that the presidential elections are over. You've finally pulled it off. But what are your comments on what the situation is like in Afghanistan?
Well, first of all, holding this election was a miracle. There was no one expecting that we could hold this presidential election.
A miracle in what way?
In many ways. First, the peace process, the so-called peace process was going on, and there was uncertainty on our partners, and there was security threat, and no one was believing the Afghan institution can hold all this pressure. Our national institution proved that, especially our army and our security forces, ANSF, did a great job to provide security. This was the first presidential election Afghan forces took the charge. So in overall, it was a miracle. And also nowhere in the world you would see someone risking her life to go and cast her vote.
You voted?
Yes, I voted, and
you're very proud to be a voter.
Of course, and many Afghans with all the challenges, and we fought to exercise our political right.
You fought to exercise your political right. In what way?
So in many ways, and first of all, our security forces did a great job, and they sacrificed their life all around the country. And second, there was a lot of big rallies happening. The rallies was threatened. The rallies was attacked, and more than 120 people died in this election. And also our security forces, they lost their life.
Who is attacking them? Is it the Taliban? Is it Daesh? Is it ISIS? Who are these people?
Well, the Taliban is the main challenge, the main security challenge, and of course the ill intention of some of our neighboring countries. And everyone was saying that because the past 5 years was not easy years, and there was ill intention.
Like who? Or which neighboring countries?
Well, it's very clear, and I mean, always have been specifically our southern neighbor. One of the problems we have faced is Pakistan, and we have enough evidence, and also the intention was the prediction, and they were always saying that after 2014 the Afghan government will collapse and the Afghan army will disintegrate. On the other hand, I think with their blood, with their bravery, they proved everyone wrong. And today, everyone is actually, all Afghans are proud of their security forces because they fight for a nation.
That's very, very compelling. What you're just saying is that there is a new pride in the Afghan security forces?
Yes, and this pride is not... This pride has been built by blood. This pride has been built by all the sacrifices. If you allow me to explain why the past 5 years was difficult years.
Yes.
First, the political transition, the first democratic transition, and this was not an easy process.
Right.
I mean, we have in the region the example of what happened in Pakistan in 1971. It led to the partition of Pakistan. On the other hand, so we were successful. All was saying Afghans are not, they don't believe in democracy, they don't believe in their political right. But a
lot of people saying that Afghanistan itself is going to be divided.
But that's why we proved, and that was a political maturity on part of our president, President Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah, to form a coalition. Although it was difficult and difficult messages, but that act in itself was first act of peace, as President always say that, because we needed to have a unity.
To create a national unity government between two rivals, exactly. President Ashraf Ghani and Dr. Abdullah.
Exactly. But that, if we couldn't have built that, I know today a lot of people doesn't agree with us, but if we wouldn't have built that, the country would have gone into a lot of mess and crisis. But we prevented that with the political act. Of course, that was not a perfect thing, right, but it prevented the larger conflict. And that itself was part of our problem. Different messaging was part of that political the bigger interest was involved, because that's, I think, prevented the bigger crisis, but it has its own problems as well. So that was first. Second, more than 100,000 of American forces left. A lot of coalition forces left.
In the last 5 years.
In the last 5 years, especially in 2014, that ended. So the Taliban was kind of, before that, was when you put the bees in a can, it was like that. So it was contained. So when they left, the can was open. They started like attacking everywhere. That was one problem. And second, I think another, because there's a lot of pressure on Pakistan, but Pakistan didn't carry any attack in the North Waziristan or South Waziristan against the terrorist groups, but they did in a very strategic, calculated timing in 2014. So they pushed all the terrorists, especially the Uyghurs, ETIM, IMU, other foreign fighters inside Afghanistan. So they were all relocated in the northern part of Afghanistan, in the north and northeast. So they look ethnically similar to the people, inhabitant of that part of the country.
Uzbeks, for example.
Exactly, Uzbeks and the Uyghurs and the Tajiks and other Central Asian fighters. So this relocation of all these terrorists from Waziristan, North Waziristan, in a time when there was a vacuum of forces, because we had no more those capabilities to hit them, the forces, the Western forces that they had left. So this created another security challenge for us, so which created a lot of misunderstanding, a lot of...
misunderstanding with who?
In a sense that people in the North thought that the central government is indifferent.
Right.
But the problem was, no, it was not about... it was about inability, lack of resources. So all three things come together: political pressure, security pressure, and also these foreign fighters being relocated there, created a lot of division among the Afghans. And also that made running a government more difficult for us. And so I think overall, surviving this whole thing, and sometime when I look back, it was not easy years. And if I would term the past 5 years, it was years that meant that Afghanistan should be torn apart, and its institution has to be collapsed or finished. And as a nation, it has to be divided. And we as a nation survived. And so I think there's a better future for us. And
that's a big achievement, the fact that you were able to overcome these huge problems.
Exactly. If we look to the problems, the challenges, the resources in our hand, I think it's in itself, it's a big success for us that we survived. And our army is today in a better place. And the younger generation in our armed forces have taken the charge. I know a lot of young officers today, they're leading this fight. And we have done some of the reforms in our security forces, the early retirement. So now younger officers with better education, with knowing the NATO system and syncing with our partners, they're taking the charge. And the reason we fight for ourselves, for our country. At the same time, of course, and we are the first front against all the terrorist group. And sometimes people asking, Afghan government is a problem or an obstacle for the peace. How could, if anyone, because suffering a lot, are we losing our soldiers? We were the first one, we want peace, but we don't want...
Are you losing on an average in a month?
Now we have a decline, and luckily it's initially 2014, beginning of 2014, 16, 17 was pick up our security forces casualties. Now there is a decline, luckily.
How many did you lose at the time?
The numbers are out, and I cannot specifically mention, but all the things meant to destroy us, we kind of survived all those shocks, surprises. So, and I see a better things. Our institutions have picked up, and
Right. So, Matin, on social media, on Twitter, for example, it's quite interesting to see some of your generals fighting. You know, actually, let me say that again. It's interesting to see some of your politicians, like, say, the Minister for Defense, putting on a uniform and fighting on the front lines. That's unusual. How did that happen?
Well, as I said, we fight for our country. We fight for our right to live. Still, a small portion of us are fighting. We have not tightened up our slips, whatever you call it. And last Friday was the first anniversary of one of our heroes, General Razak. He was a close friend of mine as well.
General Razak, who was assassinated
a year ago. And his family requested me to speak as his friend, and I was going to deliver a speech. Main part of my speech was why I'm as a Uzbek from the northern Afghanistan. What is my connection to a general who has risen up from Ispanbul in Kandahar?
He was Pashtun,
of course, and our common things, our friendship is our common enemies, our suffering together, our blood together. And because we know who are our enemies, who wants to divide us, that has brought us together. The suffering and the being a victim of terror, being a victim of all intention of our neighbors, have brought us together as a nation. So that's why today Afghanistan is much a stronger a nation than it was in the past.
So you are Uzbek and General Razak was Pashtun, but you're saying that you're not just Uzbek or Pashtun, but you're also Afghan.
We're all Afghan. Yeah, we're all what brought us together, because we all have common enemies, and we have all people. They intended to turn Afghanistan to a 4th century countries or a backyard of their own countries. So we don't allow that, and it's a proud nation. With killing of us, with killing of General Razak, with killing of our generals, with killing of like they killed my father. So other peoples will rise up and take charge. So today, if you see, General Razak is maybe one of the rare character besides Ahmad Shah Massoud and Dr. Najib. I would say General Razak. Dr. Najibullah. Today, General Razak is more popular as a young general who stood up, rise up. What made him so popular? Because his fight for the country and his understanding of the enemy, and he was the front line in the Ispanbul. So he was fighting for the country. That made him very popular, a hero in all the country. When he was killed, every Afghan cried for him. So that shows we have become a nation. So if those who have calculated that by killing us, by destroying our country, they can destroy us, they're, I think, mistaken. They have to recalculate. So,
Matin, you said several very, very important things. General Razak was a Pashtun, as you said, and when you're referring to to Pakistan as your southern neighbor, but the Pakistanis say, one of the things that they say is that the Pashtuns do not want to live in the same country as the Tajiks. So what is going on? What are the Pakistanis? Why are they doing what they're doing?
Well, I think first of all they should look their own country, what's happening there, than making a judgment on our ass. They have more problems when it comes to being a nation, and you see all of that in the social media and the protests in Pakistan. And luckily in Afghanistan no one disappears, but thousands of people have disappeared in Pakistan. Thousands of people are asking for their right, for their ethnic rights. Here as a nation we don't have that problem. In Afghanistan we never had a separatist movement. All had called for a country in Afghanistan as a nation. We had gone through a lot of problems, but there was never a call for separation. There was always a call for unity. Afghanistan has a history, and everyone knows in this region.
Just coming back to the terrorists that you talked, that Pakistan was relocating from North Waziristan and pushing them into Afghanistan. One of the groups that you mentioned were the Uyghurs. But if I remember, didn't you give the Uyghurs back to the Chinese?
Well, that's our security understanding. Every nations have their own understanding between countries, but our resolution is very clear. We don't have a double standard policy. Our policy is very clear against terrorists. Whoever he is, we fight against terrorists. We don't use terrorists as our proxies.
So no good terrorists or bad terrorists?
For us, all terrorists. So, and we that's why that's our national security policy, and we want to show that, and we have been showing that to all the world, that we are the front line against the terrorists all around and fighting, because there are certain countries are trying to turn this country to safe havens of terrorists. We will not allow that. So with showing this, we're trying to expose others' double standard or duplicity.
You mentioned briefly that your father was also killed. Was he killed by the Taliban?
Yes, he was killed in 2011 by a suicide bomber in my hometown in Takhar.
But you are negotiating, or the Americans are negotiating with the Taliban, and you are very much part, at least indirectly, in that negotiation.
We're very clear. We want to end this war. Today, Taliban is a reality of this country. Our message to the Taliban is, if you're Afghan, come respect your state. And come, if you have concerns, if you're not fighting on behalf of other countries, then sit with us. Let's end this bloodshed. And last Friday, just 2 days ago, you know what happened in Haskamina in Nangarhar? An entire village is wiped out. And who's done this? Who brought this culture of suicide bombing in this country? If today Taliban is denying, but then who brought this culture in this country? And an entire village is gone. It's not easy. It's a massacre. And nowhere in the world you see that. How could, in a praying time, all the men of a village would be killed?
You're talking about the Nangarhar, the village in Nangarhar, where the men who had gone to the mosque were wiped out at the time that they were praying.
Exactly. And Taliban saying they're denying, we haven't done. But who brought this culture of violence in this country? Who brought this terrorist culture? Who brought this suicide bombers? They provided the blueprint with other terrorist groups. So we are very clear on peace. We want to end this and end in a political way. If they have grievances, we will address those grievances, but we will not accept any terrorist group fighting on behalf of others' strategic interests to destroy this country. We're very clear on that.
Are you talking about Pakistan?
We're very clear on that. Exactly.
But if you are so closely involved with the Americans for the last 18 years, since the Americans helped throughout the Taliban, have you told the Americans that this is your red line?
Well, with Americans, I think America is our foundational partner, and together we have fought all these terrorist groups, and we don't see an ill intention on part of America, but there are sometimes short-term policies that create problems. But they
need to get out as soon as they can.
We behind the scene, back channel, and when we meet as partners, we share our concerns to each other, and
they understand.
Exactly. And we always have understanding, and we share our concerns. And on the issue, what happened in the past 8 months, we had legitimate concerns we have raised with them. These things has to be not repeated again. The Afghan government is a legitimate government, and it's a democratically elected government. It has to be respected. It's not about individual, it's not about groups, it's about a country, a nation. So from what we have been working with the United States is to work together to end this.
So the Americans understand your concerns about safe havens in Pakistan. They must know that there are these safe havens.
Of course, they know it, and they had recently a meeting in Pakistan.
When Zalmay Khalilzad met Mullah Baradar.
Exactly, and if safe havens are not there, why they're meeting there. So it's very clear. I think that if again the sanctuary, the safe havens is no more a question. It's very clear. And it's, I think it's no more. It's not a question of intelligence or security. It's very. If you ask a child, knows about that. So if anyone denying it, it's laughable.
So you're comfortable with the Americans negotiating with the Taliban?
No. If they wants to. Because we have been very clear from the beginning, and now, if America wants to negotiate their own interest, that's fine. But when it comes to Afghanistan things, we as a nation will negotiate with the Taliban. And we have been telling the Americans, our friends, our partners, we have to learn from the mistakes we have made in the past and work as partners, and which we're doing together. And on the question of Afghanistan's fate comes, it's only Afghans can decide. No one can else decide that.
So whatever the negotiations that Zalmay Khalilzad and the other Americans are doing with the Taliban, whether it's in Doha or Pakistan or Oslo, you will have your own negotiations with the Taliban after that, and you will decide, irrespective of what the Americans conclude.
Exactly. I mean, we exchange notes. Yeah. We exchange our concerns, our understanding with our American colleagues, and sometimes, of course, they, as a nation, as a country, they have their own national security interest. We have our own national security interest. Sure. What we're saying, if they're after peace, they have to work with the Afghan government. If they want to reduce their troops, then Afghan government, as a legitimate government, as a partner of United States, we have 3 documents signed, strategic partnership, and then we have bilateral security agreement, and then we have SOFA with the NATO. So we have legal documents. So if they want to reduce their troops, we're willing to negotiate with them. But it's not acceptable. The reduction the peace should not be the issue of peace process, should not be an excuse for reduction. So we should not give them unnecessary victory to the Taliban. If the question is reduction of forces, we're very much willingly open to negotiate with the United States on the reduction of troops here, which we already been doing it.
Right. What are your own red lines with the Taliban? There's a lot of concern in Kabul and in Herat, where I was some days ago, that the Taliban are coming back.
Our president always has been saying that this election showed that, and on the peace process also, 2 things has become very clear: the notion of republic and citizenship. So we want the peace within the framework of the republic. So the republic can observe Emirates, but the Emirate cannot observe us. We want the Taliban, if they're popular, they should come and contest election.
So that's what it means, that the Islamic Republic can absorb the Taliban or the Emirate that they want to, or the Emirate that they want to make.
As a political force, they can join the political process, and if they want to rule this country and contest election, win the parliament, win the presidency. If they win democratically, we will congratulate them. Why they are afraid of the people? Why they don't come out and contest election? Because the only thing they know, that is the bullet, not the ballot. So we are saying, let's just politically fight. Come forward and put your policy. If you think you're popular in the country, and come and present your agenda and win the election. Any other countries, everyone is doing that around the world. So that is what we're saying. The constitution, the Afghan constitution, the republic, is our red line. And within the republic, of course, we will bring changes in the constitution. That's a different thing. So that is, if we want a sustainable peace and stability in the country, this is the solution as Afghans, because this is not a document, a group, an elite who have built. This is the Afghan nation has.
Right. So where do you go from here, Matin? It's been 5 very, very eventful years, like you just described. Where do you go from here?
As a nation?
Yes.
I think our hard time is over. A new confident generation has emerged. They don't anymore look to the individuals for protection. They look to the state as protection. And all have lived and grown up in all this bloodshed. So as a nation, my understanding is the country will go forward. Now, I believe security-wise, we will keep doing better because a lot of reforms have happened, and our security is doing very well. For the first time, I can say that the Taliban cannot face our forces, and the only popular forces in Afghan history has been our army. Our army has never been as popular as today it is. If you go anywhere they walk, people clap for them. Because they are fighting for this country, not for an individual, for an ideology. They're fighting for a nation. And the reason why I'm saying this, as I said earlier, this war is imposed on us.
Right.
It's not we're warmongers. If someone comes destroy your village, if someone comes destroy your city, see, just recent when they attacked Takhar, my hometown, and they have taken 2 districts, they turn it to completely to the hell. All the local residents suffered a lot. Economically, financially, their homes are destroyed.
So how do you cope with that? How do you fight the Taliban back in Takhar?
And it's the local people and call for the government. Our armed forces win. Our armed forces, with the help of the local people, they defeated the Taliban. And people, sometimes they compare this timing with the timing of 90s. No, not at all. In the 90s, the Kabul was under the economic siege. The regime didn't have the popularity. It was an ideological regime. And a lot of other problems. And here now, if any districts fall, interestingly, it's very surprising, people immediately start reaching to us, and they're willing to fight to take the district back. That shows how much the hatred for the Taliban. And of course, we have made some mistakes, which we want to readdress those mistakes. And that's why, given some area, the Taliban is stronger hand. Yeah. In a democracy, things like that happens because we started from scratch in 2001. So overall, there's no alternative, no substitute for the republic, for our constitution, for our diversity, which has been a spirit of our constitution. So in a way, as a nation, as a country, economically, security-wise, we will move ahead.
So last question, Matin. What role do you want India to play in this new Afghanistan?
I think India has been true friends of Afghan nations, and it's been very clear from the beginning. It always have stood with the Afghan state and Afghan nation in the hard times. India is investing in Afghan state. We are thankful of that, and we know in a very hard time they give us helicopters, which was in a dire need, although they were also in the shortage. That shows their will to support this nation. In the time of, they have supported us in democracy, build our parliament, and in education there, and also in military way they're helping us. I think the relation between India and Afghanistan is historical, and what's happening, what India is doing, every Afghan knows. They want a prosperous Afghanistan, an independent Afghanistan to stand on its own. So that's appreciated. The popularity of the reason why India is very popular is India is not supporting any small agendas or like country like other countries or small groups. India is with the Afghan people. That is, I think, a clear message, and we're thankful for it.
Mr. Matin Bek, thank you so much for speaking to ThePrint. This is Jyoti Malhotra in Kabul for ThePrint. Please continue to watch our YouTube channel. It's live and buzzing.